Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today I have prepared a reflection for everyone, which I am titling 修身齊家治國平天下. Cultivate oneself, harmonize one's family, govern the country, and bring peace to the entire world. Actually, this quotation is from the Chinese Confucian classics, from the Book of Rites, in which Confucius once said, to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must cultivate our personal life and make our hearts sincere. In this view, the ancient Chinese believed that the individual, the family, the country, and the entire world are connected to one another, and the success of one is necessary for the success of all. So we as individuals must always find ways to self-improve ourselves and to cultivate a love for our family, our community, our country, and other people, so that we can affect a positive change in the world. Actually, the Chinese word for self-improvement or self-strengthening is 自强, or in Cantonese, 自強. Have you guys ever heard that Hong Kong song from the 1980s? 每天要自強，熱血難止，熱勝紅日光。做個好漢子. Do you guys remember that song? It was in that movie Once Upon a Time in China, starring Jet Li, directed by Chu Hart, right? Really great movie. I highly recommend it. But anyways, the lyrics of the song is, to be a hero, every day I have to self-improve. One of Confucius' students once said that every day I examine myself 3 times. In everything I do, have I been honest? In my dealings with other people, have I been trustworthy? When I led other people, have I been fair? I examine myself on 3 counts. So the point is, the ancient Chinese philosophy has always been about self-reflection, self-examination, to self-better ourselves, to improve our family, our community, our country, and to bring the world peace, to nurture the world peace, to enter into a great era of the Datong, the Great Unity. What is the Great Unity, the Datong? Great Unity is this concept that in an ideal world, virtuous people would lead the government and lead the society, where the elderly, the sick, the poor are taken care of, will have the needs taken care of, the youth would be nurtured, and that everyone would have enough to eat and would have the livelihood to make a living for themselves. Actually, this concept of Datong, the Great Unity, was directly adopted by Yat Sen, the famous Chinese revolutionary in 1924, in his 3 principles of the people, the 三民主义, the 3 principles of the people. Yat Sen once said that only when there are morals can a country be founded, and only when there's morality can the world be saved. It is the great responsibility of our 400 million Chinese people. At the time, China had 400 million people, right, in 1924, to build the great harmony and to promote the world peace. So if we read the works of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, if we read his speeches, and if we examine the 3 principles of the people, his philosophy, it is very clear that Sun Yat-sen attempted to act as a bridge between the Chinese past and the present of his time in 1924. He tried to interpret the Chinese ancient philosophies like Confucianism and also elements from Taoism and Moism, which was another Chinese school of thought, into a modern Chinese context. Today in the modern era, I think that if we want to pursue self-betterment or self-improvement, we should also attempt to examine the wisdoms of the past and try to interpret many of the ancient Chinese philosophies also, applying it to ourselves. It is very arrogant, it is very prideful, I think, to assume that just because we live in the 21st century that we're somehow better or we're somehow superior to the wisdoms of the past and that we have to learn from the wisdom of the past. No, not at all. We absolutely should promote traditional Chinese values. What are traditional Chinese values? Well, first and foremost, traditional Chinese values revolve around the family ethic. This I cannot stress enough, the family ethic. People often say, how come Chinese culture has been so continuous for the last 3,000, 4,000 years? How come China has the world's oldest continuous history? I credit that to the consistent interpretation of what the family ethic is. The Chinese family ethic is defined as a successful union of the husband and wife to foster a peaceful home life. It is written in the Confucian Doctrine of Mean, chapter 15, verse 2 to 3, that when all family members are one, it is like the harp and lute in unison. When brothers live in concord and are at peace, the strain of harmony shall never cease. The lamp of happy union lights the home, and bright days follow. Confucius, commenting on this statement, made a remark saying, in such a state of things, what more satisfaction can the parents have? So that is the Chinese family ethic. The second foundation of the Chinese culture is work ethic and the people's livelihood. Oftentimes, people express to me that, Chinese people are working so hard all the time. You guys are all work, no play. And people often say that Chinese only know how to work. Today, in the 21st century, it's the same thing. Chinese people work the 9-9-6 schedule. And people say that, look at the Chinese people. They work so hard. 9-9-6 schedule. I would go crazy. But I'll lose my mind if I worked the 9-9-6 schedule. Well, where does this work ethic of the Chinese come from? I think it comes from the Confucian virtues of being diligent in work, having a sense of personal obligation or a sense of personal loyalty to the family, to the employer, to the society, to the country, driven by a need or desire to fulfill some kind of loyalty or obligation or a sense of excellence. And it's not just Chinese people, but it's also other societies influenced by Confucianism also, like Korea, Japan, Singapore, etc., etc., etc. The third foundation of the Chinese culture is meritocracy and the pursuit of education. Governance in the eyes of the Chinese should be based on merit. That is this idea that everybody should have equal access to education. Right? Confucius once said that in teaching there should be no distinction of classes. Analects 1539. Leaders should be selected based on who is the most educated and who can perform the best. China today, in the modern era, in the 21st century, has a modern version of the civil service exam. If you want to get into office in China, if you want to be a village leader, a mayor, a representative or whatever, generally speaking, you have to take the civil service exam, which is pretty difficult, which is pretty challenging. Afterwards, you're given a low-level position where your administrative and leadership skills are put to the test. You are judged based on how well you hit certain key performance indicators, how well you fought crime, how well you grew the economy, how well you solved the problems of pollution, how well you solved the issue of housing, and so on. And at the end of the term, you are compared against your peers, and you are either promoted or fired based on your performance by your bosses, by your management. This can be considered a modern continuation of the previous Chinese system of service and examination for the selection of officials. The fourth foundation of the Chinese traditional culture is the love of peace. Chinese culture teaches us to love peace and to hate war. All Chinese philosophy tells us to love peace and to hate war. War breaks up families and destroys lives. You cannot have a Datong society if you fight a war. To borrow philosophy from Greece, from the Western thinkers, in peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons. In China, there's also a similar anti-war poem, which I have came across. At 15, I went to war. At age 80, I came home. I cooked a meal, and I did not know who to serve to. War is terrible. War ruins lives. I watched a documentary the other day about these Taiwan veterans, right? These veterans who were Kuomintang soldiers who lost the Civil War, fled to Taiwan, and they were separated from their families in the Chinese mainland. They could not even write letters to their parents or to their family members in the Chinese mainland because of the politics of the Chinese Civil War and the Cold War. It was not until 1987 or so that some of them could return to their hometowns and see their families again. In many cases, their parents had already passed away or their family members had already passed away and they never saw them again after 1949. How tragic is that? So this type of conflict should not happen again. I don't think it should happen to anybody, regardless of whatever country they come from. I think wars are terrible. I think there was another famous philosopher, I forgot his name at the moment, but he said that all wars are civil wars because all men are brothers. But even Confucius himself once said that within the 4 C's, all men are brothers also, right? Even Confucius had a similar attitude towards the world, and just like many of the other great enlightened thinkers of the world, promoted this idea of a brotherhood, of a great fraternity among the peoples of our world. The fifth foundation, which I want to touch upon, which defines our Chinese culture and our Chinese value, is the respect or the belief in faith. That is the belief or faith in God, in heaven, or having a reverence for the incomprehensible power which I think every single human being is capable of pondering or wondering about. Okay, Confucius, the man himself, once said that whoever offends heaven has no one to pray to. Heaven, 天, right, which is the same character used to describe the sky in the Chinese language, is quite an interesting concept in the Chinese ancient attitude, right? 天 was described by not just Confucius, but also Mozi and Lao Tzu and many of the other Chinese philosophers of the past as something which is all-powerful, all-knowing, wants a personal relationship with people. Confucius once said, I do not murmur against heaven, I do not grumble against men, my studies lie low and my penetration rises high, but there is heaven who knows me. There is the mandate of heaven, which uses the same character, 天命, right? Mandate of heaven. And if you look at the oracle bone script, the bronze script rather, of the Chinese character for 天, it is drawn as a humanoid figure with a head, arms, and legs, which is quite interesting. I think from a Christian perspective, I know there are Christians that watch my channel, you might interpret this as maybe a Chinese interpretation or a Chinese understanding of God, probably. That there is some kind of incomprehensible, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing mystery, which the Chinese probably interpreted through their context, and maybe the Chinese were onto this idea that maybe all human beings have a value, and that all human beings are created in the image of God also, which is why they drew the concept for heaven or the divine as a humanoid figure. It's quite possible. That's my speculation. Well, the point is, Chinese people have always, from the very first steps, from the very beginning, have had an awe for the incomprehensible power of something more powerful than us, greater than us, human beings. So I do not murmur against heaven. I do not grumble against men. My studies lie low and my penetration rises high. But there is heaven, there is 天 who knows me. There is 天 who knows me. So to answer this question, how do we become an upright Chinese person? How do we 做一个堂堂正正的中国人，做一个堂堂正正中国人 ？Adhere to the family value. Pursue personal improvement. Have a good work ethic. Pursue peace and love peace. Believe in God. And uphold propriety, justice, integrity, and ethics. That is how we become a 堂堂正正的中国人，做一个堂堂正正的中国人。